I am the malicious male supporting character in a redemption novel. I bullied the crazy yet stunning female lead, Bai Ningbing, for a full 10 years. When she embarrassed herself, I mocked her without a care in the world. On her birthday, I pushed her face into her own cake. When she showed me her answers, I turned around and reported her for cheating. The once unruly girl was finally tamed by me. She became a proper and refined young lady. Then, the true male lead appeared. I handed over the well-trained girl to him. The two made a perfect pair, like a match made in heaven. Naturally, there was no place for me anymore. For her 18th birthday, I prepared a special gift. I left the country quietly. For 4 years, I stayed away. I thought she and the male lead had reached their happy ending. Only then did I cautiously return to the country. Little did I expect that as soon as I got off the plane, I was knocked unconscious. When I woke up, I saw her gently stroking my hand. Her gaze was possessive and obsessive. "Brother Fang Yuan," she said, "it's been for years. Where is my coming-of-age gift? Here I am, fresh off the plane, regretting my choices. Thank you for the warm welcome back. Can you not keep twisting my hand? This is unsettling." I wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. I didn't dare move a muscle. After so many years, the little shadow that used to follow behind me seemed to have grown crooked. She noticed I was awake. Bai Ningbing's obsessive gaze not only failed to retract, it grew bolder. Her once cold eyes now burned with a feverish intensity. She looked me up and down, as if she wanted to devour me whole. "Brother," she murmured, "answer me. Why did you leave me?" While I did enjoy tormenting Bai Ningbing, I must confess I am a complete coward at heart. As soon as I met Bai Ningbing's pathological gaze, I wished I could merge myself into the headboard of the bed. Noticing her eyebrows start to furrow, I immediately put on a flattering smile. "I'm back, aren't I? I only left you temporarily back then." However, her expression did not relax. She still kept her little face tense. "Really? Did you return to the country to come back to me?" That slightly hurt tone truly tugs at the heartstrings. But I only rolled my eyes, racking my brain for a suitable response. After thinking for a moment, I decided to adopt a soft approach. I gently held her hand, my expression unusually sincere. "Of course. How could I lie to you?" I thought she might tone it down a bit, returning to the obedient girl from my memories. Unexpectedly, her face turned cold instead. Her grip tightened even more. "Liar! You clearly said you'd come back to see me every year. I won't believe your nonsense anymore." It seemed I had indeed made such a promise back then, but after going abroad, I had too much fun and forgot about it. Knowing that this little girl wasn't easy to deal with, I immediately changed my expression to one of pitifulness. Seeing my face showing pain, she quickly let go of my hand. A trace of guilt and concern appeared on her face. "I'm sorry, brother, but can you promise not to lie to me again?" I nodded repeatedly, vaguely realizing that she had changed quite a bit. She used to act like an innocent little rabbit in front of me. Now, the possessiveness in her eyes was no longer hidden. She stood up, looking down at me from above. After a moment, she slightly curled her lips into a smile. "Brother, will you always stay here with me?" My heart skipped a beat, and my whole body tensed up. I was just about to jump up and reject her suggestion, but as soon as I moved, there was an immediate clinking sound at my feet. The metallic rattling made me freeze. I lifted the blanket, and to my shock, I found that my ankles were chained to the foot of the bed. I stared at her in utter disbelief. She, however, maintained a cheerful expression. "What kind of imprisonment play is this? No, wait! If she wanted to lose her mind, shouldn't she imprison the male lead instead? Why imprison me, the malicious male supporting character?" Recalling all the things I had done to her in the past, I felt utterly miserable. Could it be that she planned to imprison me and slowly torment me? I had to think of a way to escape. But first, I needed to figure out where I was, or get my hands on my phone. For now, I had to appear weak and compliant to Bai Ningbing, convincing her that I wouldn't leave. When Bai Ningbing brought dinner into the room, I obediently let her feed me. Even though goosebumps crawled over my skin, I forced a smile and praised her. Ning Bing, you even remembered what I loved to eat. So thoughtful of you. Even though I was the one eating, her expression was one of pure satisfaction, as if she had tasted some gourmet delicacy herself. Of course, I remember what brother loves to eat. I made this with my own hands for brother. She waved her delicate, pampered hand in front of me. Her fingers were covered in several cuts. Those were piano-playing hands. I suddenly felt a pang of heartache, grabbing her hand and gently blowing on it. Not because I particularly cared for this little maniac, but because seeing such artistic hands damaged like this was truly a pity. After blowing on her hand for a while, I remembered to apply medicine, but as soon as I looked up, I was met with her squinted eyes full of delight. I almost forgot. She often did things like this, hurting herself to get my attention, and each time she took it further. I wanted to scold her with a cold face like I used to, but then I remembered I was still at her mercy, so I let it go with a sigh and went to get the first aid kit. Let me bandage you up. She smiled again, but this time her smile was strange, enough to make my scalp tingle. After feigning compliance for a few days, I realized she didn't seem to have any intention of torturing me. In fact, when I gently mentioned the discomfort of the ankle chain, she unlocked it. She even allowed me to move freely within the villa. But the villa was clearly a place she had prepared specially. The windows and doors required fingerprints to open. I tried several times at night, but couldn't find a way to escape. The longer I was imprisoned, the happier by Ningbing seemed, but the more anxious I became. I didn't return to the country just to stroll around. My family said there was an urgent matter that required me to come back. That's why I rushed back in such a hurry. Looking at the desolate scenery outside the window, I couldn't help but sigh. Brother, what's wrong? Do you want to go out? Bai Ningbing appeared out of nowhere, startling me. I cautiously observed her expression, noticing her calm demeanor. Instantly, I decided she was trying to bait me. No, not at all. I'm just a bit bored. So I was admiring the scenery outside. She moved to my side, joining me in gazing at this barren, God-forsaken place. Seeing that she wasn't suspicious, I let out a breath of relief. But in the next moment, I heard her say, "In that case, I'll just head out by myself." I was dumbfounded, never expecting this kind of result. She let out a soft laugh, her eyes landing on me. If brother is bored, I'll bring your phone for you to play with. At that, I couldn't care about anything else. I nodded eagerly. Sure. Although I agreed quickly this time, I still had a trace of concern in my heart. After all, Bai Ningbing didn't seem like an idiot. But to my surprise, before she left, she really handed me the phone. It was even fully charged, seeing the signal bar also at full strength. My eyes lit up with excitement, completely ignoring the fleeting displeasure on her face. Brother, she murmured, do you still remember the promise you made to me? Only then did I realize I needed to manage my expression. With a bright smile, I responded cheerfully, but she tiptoed closer to my ear, her lips hovering just beside it. Even though her breath tickled my ear unbearably, I could still hear the warning laced in her words. Behave yourself, brother, or don't blame me for taking my coming-of-age gift by force. After she left, it took a long while for my racing heartbeat to calm down. There was no time to ponder the deeper meaning behind her words. I quickly sent my location to the family driver. It wasn't that I didn't want to call the police, but my family and hers had been close allies for generations. There were plenty of ways to avenge this imprisonment without escalating it. I decided to let this slide for now and file a big complaint later. Help! Save me! Come pick me up! I messaged. Uncle Jong, got it! He replied. From those two simple words, I drew endless reassurance. Feeling relieved, I tied the bed sheets together tightly. opened the window I had already prepared, and climbed down the makeshift rope. Sliding down carefully, I landed safely. Immediately, I dove into the roadside bushes. Just in case by Ningbing doubled back unexpectedly. Not long after, Uncle Jang's car drifted to a stop in front of the villa. After confirming the license plate, I quickly opened the car door and jumped in. "Quick, get me home!" Uncle Zhang stared at me in disbelief, his eyes fixed on the stray grass still clinging to my head. But his excellent professionalism made him start the car instantly. On the way, I suddenly recalled my parents' talk about an urgent matter. I couldn't help but ask Uncle Zhang, "Uncle Zhang, what's the emergency at home? Is it serious?" In the rearview mirror, I saw him glance at me with a faint smile. "Don't worry, young master. You'll know once you're home." Hearing this, I instantly felt relieved. It seemed it wasn't anything bad. Humming along to the DJ music Uncle Zhang was playing, I stepped out of the car. As soon as I entered the house, I saw both families gathered together. Bai Ningbing was prominently among them. Seeing my stunned expression, my mom immediately shot me a glare. "What are you standing there in a daze for? Hurry up and greet your uncle and aunt." I exchanged a glance with Bai Ningbing, and my heart instantly panicked as I averted my gaze. Walking up to her parents, I greeted them politely. "Hello, uncle. Hello, aunt. I just got home. Sorry for not being more formal." And suddenly grabbed my arm and hung a jade booter around my neck. Seeing the excellent quality of the jade, my eyes widened in shock, while a sense of foreboding rose in my heart the next second, and spoke with a bright smile. "From now on, we're one family. No need for formalities between us." As sharp as I was, I immediately thought of a possibility. Looking around the room, I tried to read everyone's expressions to disprove my suspicion, but my dad and her dad both had smiles on their faces. Bai Ningbing sat next to my mom, as if they had just finished a conversation. Her mom held onto my hand tightly, refusing to let go. I was doomed. Dazed, I sat next to her mom, forcing a polite smile. But my soul had already left my body. I recalled Bai Ningbing's warning before she left earlier, and her occasional sly, smirking glances at me now. I felt as if I were sitting on pins and needles. No wonder she let me escape so easily. It was all part of her trap. No, it wasn't just that. She had planned everything out long in advance. A chill ran down my spine, and once again, I felt how terrifying Bai Ningbing could be. Excusing myself to change clothes, I went upstairs, but before I could catch my breath, I heard her voice again. "Brother, you're still not being good." I swallowed nervously, turning shakily to see her standing at my door. She seemed to have shed all her pretenses, a stark contrast to her obedient demeanor downstairs with the elders. Her expression was gloomy, her eyes dark and deep as ink, but her lips curled upward in a sickly smile. "But that's okay. This time you won't escape. Brother, have you thought of how to make up for my coming-of-age gift?" Watching her close in step by step, I had nowhere to retreat and could only shrink to the headboard. "Ningbing, calm down. The gift is ready." Seeing me cower like a timid little wife, her expression grew even darker. "Is that so? Is it the luxury watch in your suitcase meant for uncle? Or the bag for aunt? Or maybe the collar for Jinbao?" I froze in shock. I hadn't expected that she had even rummaged through my suitcase. Realizing there was no point in explaining further, I decided to just give up completely. Lying down on the bed, I stretched out my body. "Go ahead, take whatever you want." She didn't hesitate at all. Standing by the bed, she leaned down. Her fingers brushed over my cheek, neck, and chest. My face flushed bright red. I grabbed her wandering hand. She chuckled softly, her eyes filled with teasing mischief. "Aren't you letting me take whatever I want?" Before I could respond, her other hand hovered lightly over my left chest. "I want this. Will you give it to me?" Her expression was disturbingly serious. sending shivers down my spine. This version of Bai Ningbing didn't seem like someone expressing love, more like someone calculating where to cut to remove my heart. The gloomy girl from the past had transformed into a masterfully disguised maniac. No! Actually, she had always been a little crazy. From a young age, I had seen through Bai Ningbing's true nature. After she dispassionately dissected a rabbit in the garden, I started keeping a close eye on this neighbor's daughter. And because of that, when she pushed her father's mistress down the stairs, the moment I saw what happened, I rushed into my family's villa to call for an ambulance. The mistress lay unconscious on the ground, with a pool of blood spreading beneath her. Meanwhile, Bai Ningbing stood there, coldly watching from the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I couldn't help but question her. Bai Ningbing, don't you know this could kill someone? She descended the stairs slowly, not at all like a child who had done something wrong. She glanced at the bloodstain on the ground and replied meaningfully, "She's already dead." At first, I didn't understand, but then I noticed that the woman's stomach didn't match her otherwise slender figure. That's when I realized, no wonder this woman was here. She must have come to make demands. A pregnant mistress showing up to stake her claim wasn't uncommon in families like ours. But for a child so young to take such drastic action, this was the first time I had ever seen something like this. Bai Ningbing was indeed a little lunatic. When the ambulance finally arrived, her mother, alarmed by the commotion, hurried downstairs. "What's going on? Ningbing? Feng Yuan? What happened?" Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red and swollen, as she rushed down the stairs in panic. At that time, Bai Ningbing didn't yet know how to hide her true nature. With a blank expression, she calmly stated the facts. "Mother." She fell down the stairs. Her mother cast an investigative glance at me, as if wondering why I was there in the first place. Or maybe she was thinking of something else entirely. I nodded slightly. Yes, we all saw it. Hearing this, the poor woman seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Bai Ningbing also gave me a long, penetrating look, her expression opally puzzled. If you ask why I didn't expose her, well, who wants to provoke a little lunatic? Especially one who isn't legally responsible and has a penchant for dissecting rabbits. Later, I heard from others that although her father's mistress lost the child, her life was saved, and she received a large sum in compensation. I felt relieved too. But I never expected that Bai Ningbing would fixate on me from that day forward, whether at school or at home. I was constantly on edge, because her gaze seemed to follow me everywhere, like a shadow. And it wasn't a gaze I was unfamiliar with. It was the same look she had, right before she dissected that poor rabbit. Eventually, I couldn't handle the mental strain anymore. In an empty school hallway, I pushed her hard. "Bai Ningbing, when will you stop?" She was shoved against the wall with a heavy thud, but she just kept staring at me with those dark, shining eyes. Seeing her remain silent, I couldn't help but worrying if she was hurt. Feeling guilty, I asked, "Are you okay?" Bai Ningbing shook her head faintly. I frowned deeply, unable to stop myself from stepping forward and rolling up her sleeve. What I saw was a patch of bruised and swollen skin. I gasped sharply in shock. I looked up at her. Bai Ningbing's reaction was completely different from that of an ordinary girl. She observed my expression, as if she had discovered some fascinating new toy. Finally, she spoke her first words to me since that incident. "You feel sorry for me." I avoided the little lunatic's increasingly fervent gaze, my eyes darting around. "Of course not. I'm just afraid you'll tattle on me to my parents." Saying this, I grabbed her hand and led her to the nurse's office. She stumbled along behind me, finally ceasing her intense stare at me. Instead, her gaze began to wander. "You didn't tell on me, so I won't either." It sounded like innocent childish talk, but my heart sank. If I had revealed the truth back then, the consequences for me would have been unimaginable. After that incident, Bai Ningbing seemed to take great delight in both angering me and evoking my pity. And once again, I confirmed. She was a certified maniac, her mind working on a wavelength completely different from others. For some reason, though, the ties between my family and hers grew increasingly close. I had no choice but to endure this little lunatic's presence. One time, at my birthday party, Bai Ningbing sat right next to me. Looking at her in that pristine princess dress, I suddenly felt a bit awkward. For the first time, I ignored her usual expressionless face. In front of the adults, I suggested politely, "Bai Ningbing, my dear sister, how about we make a wish together?" Bai Ningbing was stunned for a moment. Under the adults' cheers, she nodded obediently. My dad turned off the lights, and my mom carefully lit the candles. Her parents started singing the birthday song for me. Even our family dog, Jinbao, placed its paws on the dining table, its eyes sparkling as it watched us. After making my wish, I looked at Bai Ningbing, seeing her lips curve into a faint smile. I grabbed her hand, and together, we blew out all the candles at once. Everyone cheered. My mom began removing the candles, preparing to cut the cake. Just then, Bai Ningbing suddenly leaned close to my ear and whispered softly, "Do you know what I wished for?" I was still immersed in the happiness of the moment, looking at her expectantly, completely ignoring the increasingly sinister curve of her lips. "I wished for everyone around you, whether people or dogs, to die except for me." By the time I processed her words, I was already panting heavily. Shoving Bai Ningbing's head into the cake, the adults all looked shocked. My dad immediately stepped forward and pulled me away. "Feigning, are you crazy?" The ringing in my ears drowned out their scolding. I couldn't hear anything my parents were saying, only see Bai Ningbing lift her head, her face covered in cream as she burst into laughter. Her parents wore strange expressions as they looked at her, and then cast a deep, probing glance at me. Looking back on it now, I think I should have held back and not acted impulsively. Otherwise, her parents might not have thought I could help Bai Ningbing become a normal person. But it was too late to say anything now. After my parents and hers reached an agreement, a grand engagement ceremony was arranged for the next day. As I sat bored, waiting for the ceremony to begin, an unexpected person approached me. Li Huo, the young master of the Li family, also the male lead of this redemption story, appeared. He stopped me with an air of righteousness, like some sort of justice warrior. "Feigning, I know you don't like Bai Ningbing. Run away from this marriage." Run away? Easier said than done. Did he think I didn't want to escape? If he handed me a $5 million check and a plane ticket, I'd be gone. I let out a snicker, unwilling to waste my breath on someone this naive. But Li Huo grabbed my arm, refusing to let go, staring at me with stubborn determination. "We are the ones who truly belong together. I will take care of Bai Ningbing for the rest of my life. You can't make her happy. Give up." Hearing this, my expression darkened. I glanced around, making sure no one was nearby, and dropped the pretense. I brushed his hand off my arm. My demeanor shifted instantly, arrogantly sizing him up and down. "You think you're the one who belongs with her? Who gave you permission to decide that?" Li Huo's jaw dropped, his stunned face frozen as he stared at me. Without another word, I walked past him and headed straight to the ceremony. Besides, who said I don't like her? I don't just like Bai Ningbing. I'm deeply in love with her. After trying countless methods, I finally caught her attention. Disguising myself as the very thing she was obsessed with, a twisted gem perfectly crafted for her, a maniac obsessed with exclusivity, and a lunatic who wants to possess the gem entirely. Aren't we the perfect match? Who in this world could be more suited to each other than us? The pleased smile on my lips vanished the moment I turned the corner toward the venue. I scanned the surroundings with a grim expression before heading to my parents' side to help greet the guests. They were all smiles and promptly ushered me over to Bai Ningbing's side. Bai Ningbing had already taken over her family's enterprise and was surrounded by peers her age. When she saw me, her eyes lit up instantly, and she abandoned her conversation with them. "Brother, would you like something to eat to tide you over?" Jealous and envious gazes from all around fell on me immediately, but Bai Ningbing's gaze never left me. From the moment I appeared utterly focused, making me shiver involuntarily. Still, I managed to pull a wry smile. Shrugging nonchalantly, she didn't seem to mind at all, stepping forward to wrap her arm around mine. "Excuse us, everyone," she said without even bothering to offer further pleasantries. She looked up at me and with her hand tightly holding mine, began leading me toward the stage. I forcefully suppressed the urge to kiss her, keeping my body stiff as I followed her. I acted as though I wasn't used to her touch. But before we made it halfway, Li Huo suddenly appeared and blocked our path. I couldn't help but furrow my brows. Interrupting me again? This guy was really asking for trouble tonight. Bai Ningbing's expression remained calm. It was the same face she showed to anyone, familiar or not. I wasn't surprised. "Do you need something?" Seeing Bai Ningbing initiate the question, Li Huo became even more enthusiastic. "Miss Bai, could I have a word with you?" Bai Ningbing shook her head, pulling me along to leave. Li Huo panicked instantly. As Bai Ningbing passed by him, he lowered his voice and said, "He's just a supporting character. I'm the one destined to be your true love." A storm raged in my heart. I stopped in my tracks. Bai Ningbing, confused, looked up at me with her small face. "Brother, what's wrong?" Li Huo truly was persistent. I chuckled coldly in my heart, deciding to teach him a lesson. I brushed Bai Ningbing's hand off my arm and turned to him with a frosty expression. "Bai Ningbing, since your little lover has come to claim you, it seems there's no need for us to get engaged." She froze, shaking her head frantically. "He's not my lover." Turning to Li Huo, she added coldly, "Li Huo, you'd better explain this to my fiancé clearly. Otherwise, I'll make sure your family pays the price." After the birthday party incident, Bai Ningbing had learned how to disguise her reactions to appear like a normal person. But as she turned to harshly confront Li Huo, watching his disbelieving expression, I found myself genuinely curious about what kind of face Bai Ningbing showed to others, so I stepped back slightly. However, Bai Ningbing seemed to misunderstand my movement, and the atmosphere around her grew colder with every inch of distance. Her anger didn't show in her expression. Instead, she smiled. Narrowing her eyes slightly at Li Huo, she said, "Very well, since that's how it is, prepare to hear about the Li family's bankruptcy." Her tone was calm, but it carried an undeniable force. Li Huo looked like he was being stared down by a venomous snake, sweat beading on his forehead within minutes. He kept swallowing nervously, but despite this, he didn't offer any further explanation. "Bai Ningbing, you only think you like him because of Stockholm Syndrome. I'm the one who can heal you and love you for a lifetime." Our conversation had already drawn a lot of attention, and now it sparked a wave of murmured discussions. Pretending to feel embarrassed, I decided to pour fuel on the fire. "Li Huo, first you tell me to run away from the wedding, and now you're here claiming you two are soulmates? Are you trying to sabotage my engagement?" Hearing me emphasize the words "run away from the wedding," Bai Ningbing's entire demeanor became chillingly dangerous, yet she merely cast Li Huo a cold, indifferent glance. She looked at him as though he were already a lifeless object. Seeing that Bai Ningbing had developed a killing intent, I finally felt a bit calmer. Honestly, I wouldn't have minded following Li Huo's suggestion and running away from the wedding, because all it would do is make Bai Ningbing deal with the Li family first, before finding a way to capture me again. What's unattainable is always the most desirable. If Bai Ningbing ever realized she already had my heart, would she still cling to me as tightly as she does now? She'd probably treat me like she treated that rabbit, though I wouldn't mind being dissected by her. I certainly wouldn't want her chasing after another prey once I'm gone. She takes pleasure in evoking different emotions from me, so I'll indulge her, tease her, and add to her joy of hunting by acting like prey trying to escape, only for her to capture me completely once again. Then, little by little, I'll give her the love she craves most. Both of us enjoy this game endlessly, but anyone else drawn into this twisted love is bound to suffer. Like Lee Huo, for example. After the engagement party, Bai Ningbing really did as she promised. She went after the Lee family, with her family's already massive influence, and the Lee family not yet at its peak. It was effortless for her to crush them. However, I didn't expect that when I was sent by my parents to Bai Ningbing's company to deliver her lunch, I would run into Lee Huo, his face pale and his demeanor utterly defeated. The once proud eldest son of the Lee family now looked like a complete wreck. His appearance was no longer as meticulous as before. He was desperately begging the receptionist, only to have her call security to throw him out. I initially planned to walk past him without getting involved, but I didn't expect that upon seeing me. Lee Hugh struggled free from the grip of the security guards and dropped to his knees in front of me with a loud thud. "Feng Yuan, please beg President Bai on my behalf. I don't want my family to go bankrupt." What was he thinking when he publicly tried to steal from me back then? I sneered internally, but outwardly I feigned hesitation. When the security guards were about to drag him away again, I finally helped him up. "Fine, I'll take you to plead with Bai Ningbing." Hearing this, his face lit up with joy, a stark contrast to the pitiful scene from earlier. Meanwhile, the staff at Bai's company treated me with the utmost respect, inviting me to use the CEO's private elevator. Li Huo eagerly trailed behind me. But once we got inside the elevator, he used the reflective surface of the polished elevator walls to start tidying up his appearance. Anger surged in my chest as I coldly glared at him, sensing my gaze. He awkwardly brushed his hair back. "Young Master Fang, I was truly out of my mind this time. I had this strange dream, and actually thought I was the male lead." I stepped slightly forward, making sure my face wouldn't be visible to the security camera, before curling my lips into a mocking smile. "Idiot!" My voice was so soft, he didn't quite catch it. So he leaned closer to me. "Brother Fang, what did you say?" I leaned toward his ear, speaking softly and delicately, but every word hit where it hurt the most. "What you dreamed is true. You are the male lead of this world. But unfortunately, Bai Ningbing is already mine." Seeing his face twist in disbelief, I intensified my tone. "Did you really think I'd help you? No! If Bai Ningbing is crushing your family, it's because I whispered the suggestion to her. Bringing you here wasn't to help, but to let you experience humiliation all over again." Afraid my words weren't sharp enough, I gestured toward the elevator's reflective surface, where our figures were clearly displayed. The difference between us was like heaven and earth. I was still impeccably dressed, while he looked pitifully shabby. Rage gradually filled Li Huo's eyes, his tightly wound emotions finally exploding. The next second, his hands wrapped around my neck. "I'll kill you." His contorted face filled my vision, and I felt the suffocating grip on my throat. I didn't struggle, but Li Huo, lost in his emotions, didn't notice anything unusual, only tightening his grip further. My vision blurred, the lunchbox in my hands slipping to the floor. My consciousness began to fade, but before I blacked out, the elevator doors were forcibly opened from the outside. Struggling to make out the figure of the person who entered, the next moment, Li Huo was shoved away forcefully by the newcomer. Bai Ningbing immediately supported me as I struggled to stand. Her venomous gaze locked onto the crumpled form of Li Huo on the ground. After carefully inspecting my injuries, the fury in her eyes became almost tangible. She instructed her secretary to help me into the office and called for a doctor. Then she turned and re-entered the elevator. I sipped the warm water the secretary had poured for me, and moments later, the sound of wails echoed from the elevator. Li Huo would likely regret not taking the opportunity to flee while Bai Ningbing was focused on me, imagining the cruel methods Bai Ningbing might use on him. It took all my strength to suppress the smirk threatening to appear on my face. When Bai Ningbing finally emerged from the elevator, I immediately put on the guise of a frightened, pitiable victim. I coughed twice for effect and spoke weakly. Bing bing. This time I was careless. Her knuckles were still smeared with blood, and a storm brewed in her eyes. She waved her hand to dismiss the secretary, and with that, a suffocating pressure filled the room. My heart pounded violently in my chest. My mind raced. Had I made a mistake somewhere? Did Li Huo say something he shouldn't have? Or was Bai Ningbing angry because she felt she was losing control over me? As I stared at the now unmasked, deranged side of Bai Ningbing, swallow nervously. I couldn't help but Ningbing. This soft call seemed to awaken the remnants of Bai Ningbing's humanity. She stopped her advance toward me, lowered her head, and the scene felt like something out of a horror movie. My sense of danger peaked. It seemed that I had gone too far. This time, Bai Ningbing truly imprisoned me. A dark room, handcuffs, and a blindfold accompanied me. For half a month, I didn't see sunlight. Li Huo's incident had clearly rattled her deeply. Her treatment of me alternated between extreme care and cold indifference. Every night when I woke up, I could feel her intense gaze on me. This heightened my nerves to an unbearable degree, making it nearly impossible to maintain my usual persona. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and pleaded with her. Ningbing, let me go. Darkness still engulfed me, and I could only feel her fingertips lightly tracing my skin. Bai Ningbing stayed silent for a long time, before wrapping her arms tightly around me. Brother, can't we live like this forever? I shook my head. Ningbing, if this continues, I'll be driven insane. Though I wouldn't actually lose my mind. I knew my true nature would eventually be completely exposed. Like now, I could barely resist the urge to embrace her back. She still said nothing, but I felt her body begin to tremble slightly. I couldn't hold back anymore. I tore off the blindfold and pulled her into my arms. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I was struck with panic. Because Bai Ningbing, without my knowledge, was already silently crying, her face covered in tears. I had never seen her cry before. I often even thought she was incapable of emotions. But I was obviously and utterly wrong. Bai Ningbing's gaze was hollow, her face pale, and tears continued to stream down her cheeks. My heart ached terribly. I regretted my actions deeply. Ningbing, don't cry. I won't leave anymore. I'll stay here with you for the rest of my life. I no longer knew what I was saying. I was only focused on comforting her, desperately pleading for her to acknowledge me, but she loosened her grip on my shirt. Her voice was calm, barely above a whisper. Feng Yuan, leave, and never come back. My heart felt like it had been torn apart. A gaping hole filled with endless fear. Impossible, she couldn't abandon me. Bai Ningbing was a paranoid lunatic. There's no way she'd let me go. I felt dizzy and overwhelmed with panic. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in. I couldn't utter a single word. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Based on everything I knew about her, she wouldn't let go so easily. If Bai Ningbing truly didn't want me anymore, I gasped for air, feeling like even breathing had become excruciating. Noticing my distress, Bai Ningbing snapped out of her daze. Realizing something was wrong, her face showed an unprecedented panic. She frantically rubbed my chest to ease my breathing, her voice trembling. What's wrong? Speak to me. I stared at her, unmoving. And finally, I saw something in her expression once again. I realized her concern for me and grabbed her hand. I probably looked worse smiling than crying at that moment, and my voice was hoarse and unpleasant. I'll take you to get your coming-of-age gift. We returned to that familiar villa from last time. I led her out with practiced ease, then drove us to my house. My mind was in a haze, and I sped down the road. Yet she wasn't afraid, stubbornly watching me. Normally, her gaze would bring me comfort. But this time, it only made me more uneasy. I was scared, afraid that if she saw my true nature, she would abandon me. When we reached my home, I pulled her out of the car. Inside, my parents and Jinbao were having dinner, their eyes widening in shock. As the two of us stormed in like madmen, I ignored them, dragging her upstairs to the door with multiple password locks. She silently watched me enter code after code, each one corresponding to a special date. The day we first met, the day I first greeted her, the day I finally caught her attention, all the way to the day of our engagement. My hands were trembling. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. To an outsider, this room would seem disturbingly eerie. Photos of her, from childhood to adulthood, covered the walls. Countless items related to Bai Ningbing were crammed into the room, but Bai Ningbing's gaze didn't show any disgust. She simply stared blankly at the only photo of us together, the one from that birthday party where we made wishes with our eyes closed. Back then, I made a wish quite similar to hers. The difference was I wished for everyone and everything around me, especially Bai Ningbing, to stay with me forever. I let out a bitter laugh and pulled back the cover over the glass display case in the center of the room. Inside was the wedding dress I had designed myself. It now stood in front of her. It had taken me for whole years to create, and I paid a hefty sum to have it flown here by private jet. But now that I looked at it, it didn't seem breathtaking enough. Not worthy of someone as perfect as Bai Ningbing. Not worthy of asterisk Bai Ningbing. I didn't dare look at her, afraid I'd see indifference or disinterest in her eyes. This is your coming-of-age gift. That single sentence drained every ounce of my strength and courage. My gaze shifted to the window. We were on the 3rd floor. It wasn't high enough to guarantee a fatal fall, but if she turned and walked away, I wouldn't hesitate to jump. After a moment of silence, I took a step toward the window. Suddenly, Bai Ningbing threw herself into my arms. Her voice was soft but clear. "Feigning, I love you too." My heart started pounding wildly again. With trembling hands, I embraced her. A commotion echoed from downstairs, but we ignored it entirely. Before long, our family members appeared in the open doorway of the room. Their expressions were indescribably strange, and in that room, two lunatics continued to love each other as if no one else existed.